Well, Kathleen, I'm glad that you mentioned the State Farm example because it's little bits of activism like that that add up to a great deal. So many of us animal advocates, especially, are aware of the cruelty that animals face and we oppose it, but we don't know how to channel our outrage appropriately. And one fantastic way of channeling it is doing the little things on a regular basis that will ultimately lead to a kinder world for animals. So when you see abuse, you speak out. When you see something outrageous like the State Farm commercial, you speak out. And these little things add up to a lot. So hats off to you for taking action. That's great.
Welcome to Plant-Based Eating for Health with your host, certified plant-based nutritionist, Kathleen Gage.
And I want to say welcome, everybody. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health. And today I am beyond excited. I get excited when I have featured experts on my show. But today, this is a guy that I started following early on. I was a stalker, I have to admit. And I was watching a lot of what he was doing on Twitter. And I was absolutely enamored with what he was posting, his love of animals, and the fact that he is such an outspoken advocate for veganism and animal rights. And so with that, I want to welcome you, John. This is John Oberg, who we're going to talk about how you can get in touch with him, how you can support his cause. And John, I would love to hear, how did you get involved with the whole vegan movement?
Kathleen, I'm honored to be here on your show and to chat with your supporters and followers. And I am excited to talk about my journey. The way that I got involved with all of this was I grew up an animal lover. And the reason I grew up an animal lover was largely due to the relationship I had with my mom. From a young age, she really instilled compassion for animals in me. And she and I were very close. And so she always taught me that, animals are vulnerable and deserve our protection and our consideration. And we need to do what we can to protect them. And there are lots of things that are happening to animals, sometimes behind closed doors, sometimes out in the open, that are really heartbreaking and things that most people would say, you shouldn't do. But these things are happening, and when you can speak out against it, you should. And I followed that mantra for a long time. Unfortunately, it took me a long, long time for me to make the full connection between the abuse that's happening to animals and how my behavior, particularly the food I was choosing to eat, really connected. And ultimately, I learned farm animals are not just equally deserving of our compassion, consideration, and respect, but they are being abused in just treacherous ways that would put farmers in prison if these acts were being committed to cats or dogs. And so if these things are happening to farm animals, why should we turn a blind eye just because we want to eat a hamburger or we want to eat some chicken wings, especially in 2020 when there is such a huge plethora of plant-based options out there, just like you talk about with your guests on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And I know you just celebrated an anniversary. It's your 11th year of being totally vegan, which congratulations and happy birthday on that. Now, you're definitely one of the most outspoken people that I see on Twitter around animal rights. And a lot of times, people, when they see the type of stuff that people like yourself, and I've been known to post some of the images, they say, oh, I don't want to see that. What do you say to the people who want to bury their head in the sand and they just say, well, I don't want to see it because it'll make me not want to eat meat, which that's the idea.
Well, it's a understandable situation to be in. I certainly don't enjoy witnessing animal abuse. I don't enjoy witnessing abuse of any kind. And especially when that abuse is tied to things that I am doing on a regular basis. And let's face the facts, guys, 95% or more of people eat animals just about every single day, eating animals and animal products. Yet, the vast majority of consumers also actively oppose animal cruelty in their beliefs. And so there's certainly a dichotomy there that is problematic, to say the least. So what I say to those individuals out there who don't want to see this cruelty is knowledge is power. I am not asking anyone to do anything. What I'm doing is hoping that they will open their eyes and open their hearts to compassion, to have compassion and consideration for those less fortunate, especially those animals who are unlucky enough to be born as farm animals.
Well, it's interesting because I just last night saw a commercial by State Farm Insurance, and the first one they did was around Jake. He was really nice to some gal, and she brought him some pizza, and I kind of ignored it, even though there's cheese on the pizza, and it definitely goes against the way I eat and the way I live my life. And I kind of just downplayed that. Well, yesterday I saw this commercial where he's at a butcher shop, and we call them butchers for a reason. And this woman, the butcher, she puts one steak on top of another, thick steaks. And she said, Jake, I just want to thank you for what you did for me. And then she puts bacon on top of it. And with that, I actually wrote State Farm and I said, I really want you to know how offensive that commercial is. And people would probably say that's a little radical, but I don't care because we each have to be a voice in our own way. But I'd like to take a step back and talk about what you were doing before you went vegan 100%. What was that turning point where you said, okay, that's it, I'll never eat meat again or any animal products again?
Well, Kathleen, I'm glad that you mentioned the State Farm example because it's little bits of activism like that that add up to a great deal. So many of us animal advocates especially are aware of the cruelty that animals face and we oppose it, but we don't know how to channel our outrage appropriately. And one fantastic way of channeling it is doing the little things on a regular basis that will ultimately lead to a kinder world for animals. So when you see abuse, you speak out. When you see something outrageous like the State Farm commercial, you speak out. And these little things add up to a lot. So hats off to you for taking action. That's great.
Thank you.
So what I had planned on doing was just continuing to love animals and eat animals for the rest of my life. And I didn't see any problem with that at all. And then two things happened. One, I had a conversation with someone who told me, hey, if you want to be, an advocate, if you want to speak out against things that are injustices in the world, because I had been telling him how I like to speak out against injustice, he said, well, a great way to do that is, because you are an animal lover, is to consider stop eating animals. And I had never made the connection between, declaring my love for animals and declaring my advocacy for animals and the food I was eating. So that planted a seed, and the seed eventually sprouted to me becoming a vegetarian. And I had plans to eventually go vegan, but I didn't really know anything about how farm animals were being treated. I went vegetarian based on principle alone. Then I sat down one day and I thought, Earthlings, that's an interesting sounding film. I will watch it. So I watched a film called Earthlings, and this would be in October of 2009. And the film was, I believe, from 2005 or 2006. Found it somewhere on the internet, streamed it, and was absolutely heartbroken. The film is often called The Vegan Maker. And the reason it's called The Vegan Maker is because it shows how animals are being exploited at the hands of humans in so many different ways. But fortunately, I felt empowered after watching that, empowered to change my ways, to change my behavior, and to go vegan right then and there. And I went vegan on October 19th, 2009, and today is October 20th, 2020. So just yesterday was my 11-year vegan anniversary, and I have never felt better. The decision to go vegan certainly made me feel like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I am so confident that it was by far one of the best decisions of my life.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny because a lot of people do remember their veganism date. Mine is September 16th, 2018. So it's been a little over 2 years. And there's another date that I will always remember. There's a few really key dates in my life, but when I got sober, 36 years ago. And I remember the day I took my last drink, my last drug, and that was it. And I remember the date my mother and father passed away. And, you know, so there's really some dates burned into my very soul and my essence. And I love the fact that so many of us do remember that date. And I know that you're very into health and fitness. And before we go any further, I want to remind people, this is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. And I've got the distinct privilege of talking with John Oberg, and you can find him at johnoberg.org. That's johnoberg.org, and you can become a Patreon contributor. He's got all different levels. There's $5, there's $25, and I'm not sure what the highest level is, but you can actually become a fan and help support his advocacy by making a contribution every month as little as $5. Actually, before we got on, I was trying to take care of that because I wanted to say I'm a Patreon of John's, but I'm going to take care of that as soon as we're done here today. And so with your fitness, how much does that play into the fact that you are a vegan?
Well, thank you so much for giving a shout out to my Patreon page, Kathleen. I really appreciate that. It's the only way that I'm able to do the work that I do each day to advocate for animals and to raise awareness about how farm animals are being treated behind the closed doors of these factory farms and slaughterhouses. So I appreciate your support and the support of your followers who choose to support me on a monthly basis. Really means a lot to me. So the way that health and fitness play in my role is, it's kind of funny. You know, honestly, I would be vegan if being vegan was less healthy than not being vegan. But the nice thing is there's a great bonus. The fact that plant-based food is significantly healthier, and so I happen to have those benefits. And so for non-vegans out there who are interested in veganism, not only is it great for the animals, but it is great for your health as well. And for me, I'm not a huge proponent of like healthy vegan food. Like I don't say, hey, everybody, we need to go on a whole foods plant-based diet. And the reason being, if we ask everybody to adopt the healthiest possible diet that happens to be plant-based, a lot of people aren't going to make any changes at all. So for me, I think it's very important that we give consumers the foods that they're used to eating, and we recommend eating those, and then hopefully over time they choose healthier and healthier routes. But luckily there's great plant-based burgers, plant-based sausages, vegan cheeses, and so on. And so for me, as far as fitness goes, I do take my fitness somewhat seriously. I consider myself a power lifter. I don't compete or anything. I just do it for myself. But I work on powerlifting, so primarily deadlifts, squats, bench press, and those sorts of moves. Actually, right after this interview, I'm going to head right over to the gym, and I'm excited for that. And I think that, you know, beyond just having good mental health, being able to go to the gym on a regular basis, I think it's really nice benefit to show to individuals that we can break vegan stereotypes. We don't need to be eating animals to get strong. And I think that this is something that is being seen more and more. And a great example of that is the documentary film that came out a year or two ago called The Game Changers, which really blew a lot of minds.
Absolutely. I have a good friend, Zach Belknap, that I actually interviewed for the show, and he went pro bodybuilding after he went plant-based, and he's 100% vegan. He does a lot of advocacy for the animals, and it's so interesting, the comments that some of the really butch guys will give him, you know, the guys that are still eating meat. And this guy has a body like a Greek god. I mean, he really works hard to have just a beautiful body. And it's not about the outward, it's really about the inward. And just some of the stuff that people say to him, and he just responds with, well, this is the choice I've made, and this is more ethical. But let's talk about the health side of eating vegan and plant-based. And because I lean definitely towards plant-based. And when I first started, I didn't want to call myself a vegan because you vegans are crazy people. Well, now I'm a crazy vegan. I have a shirt that says vegan AF that I used to wear to the gym when I was going to the gym. And my mother-in-law lives on our property and she's a really high risk. So I haven't yet gone to the gym, but I run on a regular basis. I just turned 66. I want to be one of those sassy 70 and 80-year-old women that people go, oh my God, look at that woman. And the longer I'm plant-based vegan, the healthier I get. But how much do you think would change with the whole pandemic issue and the underlying causes that cause complications if people chose and adopted a more plant-based vegan lifestyle?
Well, I should preface this with the fact that, I'm certainly no health expert or, pandemic expert, but I do firmly believe that the world would be in a significantly better place if we were eating plant-based food rather than animal-based food. Animal-based food uses so many resources and takes such a toll on the environment. And I would advocate for veganism if the only benefits were the farm animals who are being eaten and consumed and abused. But like I had mentioned earlier, there are so many other beneficiaries to the world adopting a plant-based diet. So not only are there humans becoming healthier by choosing to eat more plant-based, and of course animals being spared a lifetime of misery, but it's also doing a great deal of good for the environment. It's doing a great deal of good for world hunger in terms of reducing world hunger, because we are significantly more efficient with our resources when we don't grow a bunch of grain and food to feed the farm animals to then feed them to humans. That is extremely inefficient. It's also great for social justice and to advocate for better working conditions and to advocate for those who have to work in these kinds of places where abuse is rampant. So there are so many beneficiaries to plant-based eating.
So where do you see things going? Because with our current administration, let's admit it, they're not really focused on anything to do with the environment, climate change. The factory farming, when they proved that the pandemic actually was being spread rampantly at factory farms, that was kind of put on the back burner, and it has been an issue that's disappeared. Where do you see things going if we don't make changes moving forward? And then if we do make changes, like what are the changes that people need to make on a daily basis? Because quite seriously, people, when I watch the news and I see these stories about people that had complications with the pandemic, I look at that and I go, but they're 100 pounds overweight. They've got diabetes. They've got heart problems. They've got all these issues that really could be minimized if they changed their lifestyle. What do you see moving forward with all of that?
Well, I believe that as we all care about having a healthy earth to live in, we should take how our behavior impacts that seriously. And that is something that each one of us as consumers, we have a lot of power. Our purchasing power is massive. So there are a lot of problems in the world, a lot more than just simply farm animal abuse. There is war, there's genocide, there's absolutely, the list could go on and on and on of problems happening around the globe. Most problems, however, are out of our control. This problem is within our control. And what do I mean by it's within our control? Every single time you sit down and to eat a meal, to choose something off a menu, to pick something off of a grocery store shelf, You are making a choice. You're voting. And so, yes, Americans can go out and vote in 2 weeks. And I hope that many, many do. But we vote every single day with our food choices for a world that we want or a world that we don't want. And most of us should really focus on creating that world that we do want, because we're all in this together and we all actively oppose cruelty and oppression and the terrible things going on behind these closed doors of factory farms and slaughterhouses. And so it's very vital that we get our behavior to match those ethics that we already have.
Absolutely. Now, I know that you're like very, very visible on Twitter. Is that your main platform for social media, or do you have other platforms that people can find you on? And if so, if you could share some of those ways that people can find you, in addition to johnoberg.org, and we'll put that in the show notes. We'll make sure that people have access to your information. I do encourage people support what John is doing, because start following him and you will be amazed, not only at what you're posting, John, but how people are responding. You get a lot of repost, you get a lot of likes. I repost a lot of your tweets. And how do people find you in addition to your website?
Thanks so much again for the shout out, Kathleen. I really appreciate that. So the way that people can find me on social media is through John Oberg. That's my handle. And to answer your question about where I focus my efforts, so I believe that each one of us as advocates, we really need to reach as many people as possible. We need to find our niche. We need to run with that niche. And so I do social media consulting, and I really focus on getting the animal advocacy community to take social media more seriously. And for me, I use the 3 following platforms primarily: Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Excellent. I would love to spend more time on other platforms, but I make the biggest impact possible with those 3 platforms. And hey, we all have an opportunity cost, right? So I choose to spend most of my time on those 3 platforms. Twitter is where I make the biggest difference, and then Facebook probably, and then Instagram. And so my handle is the same on Twitter and Instagram. It's just at John Oberg, and on Facebook at John Oberg Official.
Excellent. And if somebody wants to start posting information, let's say that I want to be a little more vocal about my advocacy, and yet I'm afraid I'm going to be judged, which the more visible you are, the more you get judged. That's what I tell my clients. And so don't be afraid to put a stake in the ground, no pun intended, but put your stake in the ground, and really stand up for what you believe in. But if somebody really feels like that's what they want to do, but they're a little bit hesitant, how has your life changed since you've become very visible and very vocal as an animal advocate?
Well, I certainly come across my fair share of trolls. I just recently receiving some messages on Facebook calling me all kinds of terrible names that I cannot repeat here. I just got one yesterday that said, "You're a," and I cannot even say the word, and that's okay. That comes with the territory. People who aren't making an impact aren't receiving awful messages like this. Mm-hmm. Why? So it's important that we accept that we're not going to be liked and accepted by everyone, but that doesn't matter. The people who don't like us, they don't matter. Who matters? Those out there who we can influence. And as vegan advocates, all that we can do is focus on creating as much change for animals as possible, reaching as many people as possible with a message of compassion for animals, a compassion that all of us share.
So in your business, you're a social media consultant. How would you work with somebody who they need a presence on social media? Because I always encourage people, support the people that are doing the most for the animals. And in my business, I work with people on how to get on podcast shows, how to start podcast shows. And so that's really where my revenue stream comes from, to help support my advocacy for animals. And prior to becoming a vegan, I actually was doing a lot of animal rescue. And it was so interesting, John, because one day I am such a proponent of animal rescue. We have horses, we have chickens, we have a rooster, we have 2 dogs, we have a cat, and a lot of barn mice. And because we live on some property. And one day I was kind of connecting the dots like what you said. And it was like, here I am talking about taking care of the animals. I work within the pet industry. I'm a keynote speaker at pet conferences, and yet I'm eating animals. Such a disconnect. But how do you work with people in your actual business that's outside of the animal advocacy?
So I do focus most of my efforts on the animal advocacy community because I want to further the mission of these organizations. But many of the concepts that I discuss with these individuals are applicable across the board to any types of individuals, businesses, and so on. And I really focus on getting people to find out what they really want out of social media and how to get there. And a lot of people are very intimidated by social media, which is very understandable. It's a constantly shifting landscape, and it's often directed towards people of a different age, and so on. And so it's important that we all do at least recognize the importance and the power that social media provides and do our best to get there. And so I do a range of activities, including audits, reviews, and one-on-one training and coaching. And so I'm certainly open to working with any number of clients.
Wonderful. And anybody who is interested in John's services, just go to johnoberg.org. And I'm the same way. The longer that I am vegan and moving further and further into it, I belong to an organization that's an international vegan women's organization, and I'm starting to connect with people who are actually hiring me to work with them on their visibility online. And I would encourage you, get in touch with John and find out what he has to offer, because the only way that we can keep doing what we do is for our businesses to be viable businesses and sustainable businesses. So for somebody who, they're listening to this conversation and they're saying, I've been thinking of going vegan, I really want to, what are some of the first baby steps that people can take that would help them to really move in that direction? They don't have to do it as dramatically as you and I have done, but maybe they just want to make a few changes. What would you recommend, John?
Yeah, well, for me, I actually went vegetarian, again, based on principle. And then I slowly weaned myself off of animal products until I eventually watched Earthlings. But it took me 10 months to get there, to go from vegetarian to vegan. And so one thing I recommend is not feeling like you have to go all in overnight. And yes, I would love for the whole world to go vegan at a snap of my fingers. But unfortunately, when you have such a dramatic ask, people might do it, but then in a few days or a few weeks, they are going to throw in the towel and then throw right the whole idea of going vegan because they jumped in too much, too fast. And so I really recommend going at a pace that is sustainable for you. So if you are in some great setup where you have full access to great vegan food and you think you can go vegan overnight, then do it. But if you're like most Americans or most people out there, I would recommend kind of dabbling with veganism and then working it into your diet as much as you can. Then I would also recommend finding the great resources out there. So don't just say, okay, I'm going to try going vegan. I don't know what I'm going to eat. I'm going to go to the grocery store and just wander aimlessly through the aisles and maybe go to the produce section, just fill my cart with a bunch of produce and have no plan at all. Fortunately, if you search vegan or vegan recipes, you will literally see tens of millions of results on Google, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. These are chock full of great vegan dishes out there. And so you can certainly find lots and lots of resources out there. So Google is your friend. And then resources like Veganuary, challenge22.com. These are really great resources at your disposal. And the third thing I will say is to find community. It might be easy to be inspired to go vegan, but then if you don't have community, it can be harder to stay vegan. And there are a lot of people out there who go vegan and stop being vegan. And a big reason for that is because they found it to be too difficult socially because they didn't have community or didn't have a support via community. So maybe even if a lot of your friends aren't vegan, if you have one vegan friend who kind of showed you the way, that is really helpful. So find vegan community either locally through local meetup groups or Facebook groups, or through social media. And those are great ways of having community, which will really make being vegan more sustainable and more realistic for you.
I'm so glad you talked about community, because one of the issues, I have a Facebook group, it's called Plant-Based Eating for Health, which ties in with plantbasedeatingforhealth.com. And you can find a lot of information there. You can get my ebook on my journey when I first started. And the big issue that I hear from people is, well, I don't have support from my wife, or I don't have support from my husband, or I don't have support from my significant other. And that often is the reason they stop. And so finding that community is so important. And yet what's interesting is oftentimes when somebody does go vegan and plant-based, they find that they enjoy cooking. Like before we got on this call, I actually put in my crock pot. I love my crock pot, and I haven't done the Instapot yet, but I'm making a split pea soup, and my mother-in-law loves it. And last night she said, when are you going to make that split pea soup again? So I thought, well, I'll just put everything in the crock pot, and presto, it's done. So I really encourage people to take that to heart about finding community, and it doesn't have to be black and white. But John, I so appreciate everything that you've shared today. I so appreciate what you're doing. And I was thrilled when I invited you to be on the show and you immediately said yes. And is there anything that we can do for you to help you further your cause?
I really appreciate being invited on the show, Kathleen. It's an honor to be here with you and your supporters. And should anybody be interested in supporting the work that I'm doing for animals on a regular basis, I would love for you to consider becoming a patron. That's the single biggest way that makes my work sustainable. And for as little as $5 a month, which is the equivalent of maybe a coffee, you can really take my work to the next level and really allow me to continue doing this work full time. And for anybody out there who's interested in one-on-one social media consulting, they can certainly reach out. There's a Google form on my website at johnoberg.org that they can fill out, and I'll be in contact with you about that.
That's awesome. And one last question. When's the book coming out? I mean, you know, you have to have a book. I'm an author many times over, and it always amazes me when somebody of your caliber and your visibility doesn't have a book yet. Maybe you do. Maybe I don't know about it. So when's the book coming out?
Kathleen, that's funny. I would love to write a book, and it's something I've considered for many years, but the opportunity just hasn't found its way to my doorstep yet. So maybe that'll change at some point. Maybe
we need to talk about that. Yeah, maybe we need to talk about that because that's something that I actually have worked with a lot of people on, is getting their book to market. So John, this has been delightful, and I encourage people, again, go to johnoberg.org. That's johnoberg.org, and we'll put all the information in the show notes. Check him out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and really consider becoming a Patreon, because it's a great way to support his cause. And I'm going to be doing that as soon as we get off this call. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health. I encourage you, subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, the bell notification, and go out there and make a difference through what you put at the end of your fork. Have a great day.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.